Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the cause of Christ among Free Will Baptists around the world. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Tom Willey Jr. He's written a book that I encourage all of you to get. It's called I Will Build My Church, The History of Free Will Baptist in Panama and in Cuba. And so, Brother Tom, you have really had quite the life, haven't you, as a missionary? And I think I should explain to people a little bit of what you've done. The good thing is you were born in North Carolina. So we could say that you were destined for good things because of that. We won't say what year you were born, but it was a few years ago. And then you served as with your missionary parents, what are often referred to as Pop and Tom Willey or Pop and Mom Willey. And you went, I believe, when you were 9 years of age. You left in 1960 and ended up going to Panama. But you also served in many other ways. I think you served in Panama until 1975, but you worked with Christian magazines. You worked for many years with World Relief of the National Association of Evangelicals. So you had what we might call a very storied career, very storied ministry, my friend, over the years, didn't you?
My whole life has been dedicated to serving the Lord Jesus. If he's done anything through me, it's his work. Mm-hmm. That's why I titled my book, I Will Build My Church, because he does all the building.
Yes.
He does actually the planning. We may plan, we may think that we're going to do something, but if it's in accordance with him, with his will, it will happen. If it's not, he will change it. And that's one of the great things that serving the Lord. And by the way, I've had the privilege of serving the Lord almost all of my life. Mm-hmm. I have pictures of when I learned to walk. I learned to walk in a sawdust trail that Dad had rented in High Point, North Carolina, which I was born. And he had rented a livery barn and strewed it with sawdust. So I learned to walk in the sawdust trail. I have pictures of myself in front of that. Dad called it, we were with the Free Will Baptist, or with the Christian Missionary Alliance at that time. And Dad called it the tabernacle. And that's, he has a picture of me standing with a little Indian boy at that time in 1930, probably 34, because I was about 4 years old, 3 years old or something. I just learned to walk. But anyway, later on, when I was 5 years old, we were in Panama, and I had my first experience of spreading the gospel. I had the privilege of contacting the state of Missouri and getting permission to reprint some of the articles that Mom and Dad sent from Panama at that time. And Mom tells of me on My Little Pony going to villages, taking the gospel at that time. And they didn't speak Spanish very well. Never did. But I was fluent. In fact, I forgot my English, and I had to learn English all over again. I could understand my English, but I couldn't speak. And so that was, we were, I was singing choruses, and Mom said she couldn't understand all of the choruses, but I was singing them. And we were taking the gospel at that time. Later on, God used me so many ways. And in 1945, he confirmed by having an accident that nobody should have survived. I just recently told my testimony to a Christian doctor here, and he asked me, why did I believe that God had a purpose for me, and that he kept me alive at that time. I was just to tell you quickly, my jugular vein was split and a muscle held it for 6 hours until I was on the operating table. And the doctors finally, in desperation, said, it's got to be a jugular vein, but how could this kid be alive all this time? And he slit this. I still have the scar. He slit that open, and sure enough,
wow,
the lance had gone all the way to my vertebra and cracked it, but it had slit and fortunately it slit it. It didn't cut it crossways. Had I crossed as it had been crossways, it wouldn't have worked. But God kept me alive. And so I told this doctor basically what I've told you on the back of that book. Why God has kept me alive all these years. And he's given me a special privilege. He's given me the opportunity to see my work, his work, completed in me. And so I can't say that I've done anything. I've just followed orders.
That's good.
Follow the orders. And that's what I'm telling about Cuba. Dr. Clyde Taylor said this. He had known Dad since they were young missionaries in Peru, back with the Christian Missionary Alliance. He was the youngest missionary that the Christian Missionary Alliance ever sent to the field. He was 19 years old when Dad met him, and Dad was in his mid-20s. And they shared a cabin in the jungle in Peru at that time. And so it was a lifetime friendship that my parents had with Dr. Clyde Taylor. He believed that God had a purpose for the Free Will Baptist work. And I look back at that history.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of most missionary works take about 50 years before you really see much work. To me, Panama is the greatest work that God had ever gave me the privilege of working with, because I was there from scratch, from little kids. The first picture that I took in the village where I landed with a borrowed airplane, and I was not supposed to land there. It had not been inaugurated. And so I landed at the airport and back in Panama City, and I said, "We've been to Cañitas." And they said, "You've not been to Cañitas because it has not been inaugurated yet. It's not been dedicated by the government." So we landed before they did. But I took 2 pictures in front of the airplane, and one of those little boys that was standing in front of the airplane became the moderator of the National Association of Free Will Baptists in Panama.
Wow.
50 years later.
Wow. How about that?
God gave me the opportunity through World Relief of having an interview with Fidel Castro.
Hmm.
And we had closed the seminary, and it was the only way to reopen the seminary in 1986.
86.
I had the interview with him in 86, and the only way we could have reopened the seminary in 19
Was the
87. The order came from the central offices, from Fidel Castro's office, saying you can open the seminary.
Wow. Now, Brother Willey, I've got to ask you, what was that like? Doing that interview with him? What was that like at that particular point?
Well, as usual, he invited us to his office at 10:30 at night.
Huh.
And it lasted to 3:30 in the morning.
Wow.
At 3:30 in the morning, he said those famous words that I can never forget. Castro said, "What can we do for you?" But then he asked me personally, in a personal conversation, "What can I do for you?"
Wow.
I'll never forget those words. ¿Qué puedo hacer por ti?
Wow.
Why?
Yeah. So he
Did
had
God put those words in Fidel Castro's word
in his mind, I guess,
in his lips
Yes.
to say, "What can I do for you?" And so I explained that we had not closed the seminary for reasons of political reasons, or we had closed the seminary because we were going to build in 1958. We closed the seminary and graduated everybody. We invented diplomas to give people in order to get them out and close the seminary in order to build new buildings and have a new curriculum and a new seminary, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was formed in 1987.
Mm-hmm. And that's
And one of the twins from North Carolina, twin preachers that were,
Melvin and Milton.
yes, one of them went with us with Mom,
Mm-hmm.
and we opened the seminary in 1977. The Cuban government, another miracle. The Cuban government invited Mom and me, and Ethel was taking care of Mom at that time. We had not thought of getting married. But Ethel went to Cuba in 1977, and I said, maybe the Lord has changed my thesis. And I explained to the Cuban pastors at the seminary what they could do with TEE. I asked him, will the government, at that time, the seminary was known as el centro de convenciones de los Bautistas Libres. It was known as the center of conferences and conventions for, and I asked them, I said, will they let you have a monthly meeting with people from the church? They said, yes, they will probably give us permission for that. So I said, look, I explained TEE to them, and I said, once a month, have your students come in here that are preparing, that want to be pastors, and you can give them classes. All the old pastors that are here can qualify as pastors or as teachers, and you can teach them. And so in 1987, we gave out the diplomas for the first TEE program that they had all those years under the nose of the communists.
It was truly a God thing, wasn't it?
So anyway, you know the seminary. You know how God has blessed. And the seminary now has basically graduate degrees. People come as candidates for the seminary who have degrees in engineering, in all kinds of degrees, and they have to have a college degree to enter the seminary anymore. So basically, it is a seminary.
It is.
It may not be classified as seminary in our thinking, but everybody is working on a graduate degree.
Yeah.
That goes to the seminary in Cuba.
Absolutely. So
you know, that's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And
Uh,
in the midst of all of this, shall we say, difficulty, that the seminary has prospered in such a way.
yeah. In 1940, my family moved down to Cuba with the idea of staying probably a year or so. We had been, my mom had gone to school with the Paynes, with Hugo Payne, Hugh Payne, pardon me, I'm speaking Spanish.
Yeah.
But she had gone back in the 20s to school with him and graduated from Toccoa in North Georgia. And so we had a friendship from Cuba. And Hugh Payne invited Mom to teach in the Bible Institute that he had in Jaruco in Cuba. At that time, Mom and Dad both had the idea that they would go back to Panama. In the little village where we lived in the mountains, one of the ex-presidents of Panama had a little resort because it was, we were living in an extinct volcano. It had been a volcano before. Now it was jungle and an ideal climate for Panama. I don't know if you've been to Panama, but
it's pretty warm.
It's very hot.
Yeah.
You will walk out of the airplane and it feels like you are entering a furnace.
Yes, absolutely.
It is hot. And so Mom was not too healthy. And so the Methodist, who, by the way, Mom and Dad were originally Methodist. They went from Methodist to Christian Missionary Alliance, and But Dad had still some contacts with his Asbury, because he went to Asbury for years. Don't ask how many years, but anyway.
He went a couple.
He didn't know how to read and write when he went to Asbury. And they were kind enough to run him through grade school and teach him to read and write. And he'd been so many years in Asbury that he not graduated yet. And so when the Christian Missionary Alliance, who was not a denomination at the time, asked for a volunteer to go to the jungle in Peru, Dad went. They needed a carpenter, and Dad was a master carpenter. He built most things that we have in Cuba. Clyde Taylor says Tom Willey had a vision that he did not know that worked through him. In 1942, came Pearl Harbor. We were not allowed to go back to Panama. No civilian U.S. citizen was allowed to move back to Panama. The Panama Canal controls Panama. So we could not go back. Dad had made friends with one of the ex-presidents, and he said, when we get rid of this political situation, we'll have you come back and you can do your work. God was in Pearl Harbor. We were not allowed to go back. So Dad looked around in Cuba, and there was a whole province that there were only a few Baptists and a few Methodists and a few mission works. So Dad, after consulting with the Bible Society in Havana and others, took off. And at that time, there was no other way to travel in Cuba, but the train who went all the way down to the end of the island, to the town of Guane, was the end of the railroad line. Or was on horseback. So Dad bought a bunch of horses surplus from the Cuban army. He got them probably for $10 each. Some of them were wild. In fact, as a teenager, it was my job to break them.
Oh boy.
And fortunately, in the first years of Cuba, and I was only 10 years old when we went to, I was 9 years old. Actually, it was after my birthday, so I was already 10 years old. But Dad, it was 2 years later when I was about 12 years old, and I had been raised in Panama, in El Valle, on horses. So I had been riding horses ever since I was 4 years old. And I remember taking the horses to the pasture in Panama when I was 5 years old, and having rainfalls catch me. Anyway, so when Winford Davis went down on his honeymoon in that famous letter that you have in the historical things. I don't know if you've read it or not. Resuming everything. The reason we had was that in 2 years, from the founding of the work to 1944, we had a convention, organized churches, and in 2 years, and a seminary with professors and all of that. That is why Clyde Taylor called it the miracle of modern missions, because these Dad found these groups, including all of the young men that studied Benito and all of them, who were already believers, and he organized them into an association. And in 1944, Winford Davis went back with his bride, and I think they had a little child by then, but he went back and organized the first churches. And so that all happened in 2 years.
Wow.
That's why Clyde Taylor called it the miracle of modern missions.
That's great. Well, I so appreciate you taking the time to share with us today, my friend. This is just it's a miracle. And it's wonderful to get to hear you share with us what happened as you witnessed it firsthand and you participated in it. You were part of this.
Yes.
Well, thank you for taking the time to share with us today. And we also thank all our listeners for stopping in and taking the time. And we encourage you to like this podcast, to share it with other folks, and just remember the miracle of modern missions. This is a story that needs to be told many times over. Thank you, Brother Tom.
Thank you for putting up with me telling the story.
It was a pleasure, my friend.